Yes, people, Manscaped is back, but this time it's not for below the belt grooming. Manscaped brings to you the Beard Hedger, the best product on the market when it comes to beard trimmers. The Beard Hedger is unique due to its number of gradient settings. As someone who's purchased this, I won't turn to any other beard trimmer. Check it out for yourself at manscaped.com. And don't forget to use code FTM20 to get 20% off of this product.
Yes, people, how we doing? Big up to all of you for being here. Big up to all of you for coming over from the Football Terrace as well. Thank you to Terry for that redirect. So welcome to all the Terrace fans that are in the building. I've got Tom Canton with me. Tom, how are you, bruv?
Yeah, good man. Yourself?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you, mate. Did you like my acting there? Was you impressed?
Yeah, I was very good. I was quite impressed with that. You know, it's the Manscaped's clearly working for you. I hope it's worth it for the nights out you'll have, I'm sure, as well.
Listen, man, it's got to be done. Listen, people, pinned in the comments is Manscaped. You get 20% off the Beard Hedger. For all you beard lovers out there, make sure you do it. All you got to do is click that link, and then you'll be able to get the product. At the 20% will already be off of it, but you can use code FTM20 if you need to. So please make sure you do that. Manscaped is not now, Tom, just below the belt grooming. I didn't actually know that until I'd spoken to them. So they do it now. All sorts of male grooming. So if you're into your male grooming, get over to Manscaped. Use the code FTM20 and you get 20% off. So that's what's got to happen. Tom, it's been a while, my bro. How are you?
Yeah, it's good. Last time we chatted was what? Southgate out. That's what it was, I think.
It was. And luckily, football is getting back. It wasn't coming home, but it is now coming back, bruv. And Arsenal are back. But the transfer window has been pretty quiet, I would say, in the last few weeks, but it's starting to pick up a little bit now. I wanted to ask you from the off, bruv, like, why do you think that is? Do you think it is PSR? Do you think it's the Euros and Copa America getting involved? Or do you think it's a little bit of a mixture? Or is it something that we don't know about, Tom? What do you think, bruv?
Yeah, it's all of that. It's the Copa America and the Euros, obviously, the biggest impact. The PSR stuff going on. Arsenal, last summer signed Raya on loan with that option so that they could, more effectively comply with those restrictions. And we signed him permanently at the start of this window. And we waited until, after that deadline to make that David Raya deal permanent. So all the indications there that Arsenal had to do a little bit of shimmying to stay within those gradients. So I'm glad that they've done that. But now all the focus is, of course, making sure we get those players in. We've seen Man City and Liverpool not really active either in the market at the moment, which is, if you're a Liverpool fan, you must be fuming, really, because you've got a new manager coming in. You want him to, stamp his mark on the team, and they've not signed any players so far. Man City signed Savio, which is basically like Arsenal having signed Raya, because it was a deal that was basically in the works for a very long time, and he's part of their City football group. So, it's not like it was a meaningful or drawn-out negotiation in any sense. So the title chasers are being meticulous with their business this summer.
Yeah, facts. Listen, it's not just Arsenal as well. There's only really Manchester United that are the talk of the town every single morning, it seems. But I think things will start to pick up. Pre-season, Tom, let's quickly mention that. The squad that's gone, some of my Arsenal friends that are a little bit more worriers and flappers than yourself are suggesting that it's a little bit embarrassing that we have brought a bunch of kids on pre-season. I kind of expected that, Tom. I'm not going to lie, because, well, I did when England got to the final anyway, that's for sure, because obviously Rice and Saka and Ramsdale weren't going to be a part of it. David Raya obviously wasn't going to be a part of it. And when Germany and France had got themselves into a similar position, I didn't expect to see Havertz or Saliba. So I'm not too surprised myself. But what about you, bro?
Yeah, I don't know what they're asking for. Like, what do you want us to do? Like, just... keep hold of El Neni, keep hold of Cedric, just so we've got some senior players in the group to take with us. I wouldn't, Arsenal, of course, have got players away from the team at the moment on their holidays, and they're entitled to those. Havertz, Gabriel, Magalhaes, and Martinelli are coming back on Friday. They'll be with the group for the Man United and Liverpool games, and then the likes of Saka and Rice and Ramsdale, Raya, Saliba will be back for the Emirates friendlies when we return from the America. So, and of course, any signings we make will be expected to join up. Calafiori, for instance, being one who I know we'll talk about a bit more shortly, will be expected to join up with the group in America too, as Jorginho already has. So, yeah, I don't know. And I remember, a couple of years ago when we went to America and people were like, Arteta's not taking any kids. This is disgraceful. He's not giving any kids an opportunity. Now he takes 12 and we haven't taken too many. So, there's always something to moan about.
There is, man. There is. I'm looking forward to pre-season. I always do. I won't lie. I agree certainly with some of the stuff that people are saying that we might not look as prepared going into the new season. I think the Euros, however, and the Copa America are the reasons that have potentially ruined that. I don't think that's on Edu and Arteta. Now, some people might look at that and say that we haven't signed anyone yet and we've not looking proactive enough yet. That can be said, but I imagine anyway, the players that we link with have all been a part of those competitions. So it's going to take a little bit longer. But we're going to mention some of them. Now, we might as well start with Calafiori because I've not actually been on a show with you to ask you about this yet. I want this one to happen. I think it probably will happen eventually. So my two questions are, do you think it will happen and what sort of player are we getting here, Tom?
Yeah, I'm very confident at this stage. It seems we're edging towards that medical situation this week, and hopefully this week we should get a confirmation. Fingers crossed. And it's a player that we need because last season we were very fortunate with the reliability of our defenders for the most part, other than on that left-hand side. Ben White was fit for pretty much the whole season, barring a few knee issues, which he played through. Saliba played every single minute of the season. Gabriel, barring the opening few games, played every single game over the course of the season, and none of them experienced any injury issues. So you've got depth in the likes of Tomiyasu, who is injury prone and is currently injured. You've got Timber, who of course missed the entirety of last season with a knee injury that you don't know how he's going to respond to. Kivior, of course, is being linked with an exit at the moment, but I rate the guy. I think he's good for depth on our left-hand side. I mean, he started away at Manchester City in our most important game of the season. We kept a clean sheet. You don't start in that game if you've got Zinchenko and Tomiyasu on the bench if you're not trusted by the manager. So, I do like Kivior, but there is a chance he could still go this summer. And Zinchenko, obviously, we need to bring in somebody who's more astutely defensive on that left-hand side to play that position. Is that what Arteta likes in a centre-half who can also play at full-back? And Calafiori brings you that defensive ability, but also adds plenty going forward. He's progressive. He's confident on the ball. He likes taking players on. He likes stepping into midfield, either at left-back or at left-sided centre-half as well. If Arsenal ever wanted to switch to a back three, it'd be an excellent foil for the left-sided centre-back position in a back three as well. So there's loads of, qualities in him that I see that Arteta, clearly the reason why he likes him. And it seems we're getting him for a very good price. I think £33 million up front with like 4 million in add-ons. It's looking very good.
Yeah, Tom, I wanted to ask you on Calafiori because I listened to Tony Cascarino the other day compare him to Sergio Ramos. There's been many calling him Baby Maldini and the new Maldini. I think we need to calm down from my perspective. However, why do you think that he's getting linked to those sort of big names? Are people seeing attributes that they had at that age? Is it because he looks similar to the style of play? Do you think what? Or is it because he's got long hair and he's Italian?
Well, to be fair, Maldini obviously was a defender who could play and started off, in his younger time playing, as a fullback before moving more, solidly as a left-sided centre half and just in the back line as well. But I think that for Calafiori, and any signing that Arsenal make, there's always that desire and temptation to start comparing them to, brilliant players of the past. The reality is these players are their own people, their own person. And so that's really important that we make sure that we keep hold of those players that we've got highly rated in the squad, but also add to them with further potential such as Calafiori as well.
Yeah, facts. I am excited by what I hear, bro, and I do need to kind of reserve judgment until he's got an Arsenal shirt in his hands first before I start to see him playing football in an Arsenal shirt. But I will say that what I hear is very, very good. Euros, he was fantastic from what we hear. And he's been probably one of the most talked about defenders in Italy and was a massive reason as to why Bologna did so well. So those things are going to be massive. I think he's going to play at left back, I must say. And I know that Gabriel and Saliba, people are talking about, might be potentially broken up one day, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. Ben White, we know, is going to play right back. I wanted to ask you about the position before we move on to the next rumour, is because there will be some players I think that might move. You've mentioned Jacob Kivior. Kieran Tierney's still at the club that's injured. Tomiyasu injured. Zinchenko, rumours a few weeks ago that he might be linked towards Bayern Munich or other clubs. Do you see any movement out from any of our defenders?
Kivior, as I mentioned, potentially one. Zinchenko is an interesting one because he's down to 2 years left on his deal, and there's no indication that Arsenal are looking to renew that contract. And Arsenal at the moment are a club that when they get players to 2 years, a decision is usually made, whether or not they see them, as a potential to stay longer, especially at the age Zinchenko is 27. And so the fact that they have not really made any proactive attempt to try and renew that deal or show indication that they want to is probably a big hint that, they are open to a sale. But the problem is with Zinchenko is there aren't too many clubs of the caliber of Arsenal, which is a club that I believe he is good enough to be playing for, that are looking. The only club really that could come into contention is perhaps Bayern Munich if Alphonso Davies was, for instance, to move on, because there is obviously a liking of Zinchenko from Vincent Kompany from his time at Manchester City together. So there's that link there. Tomiyasu, despite being injured, was never really linked with an exit. Kieran Tierney, of course, was a player that we expected to leave, but his hamstring problem is kind of complicated that. We don't know if that's going to happen. If he's injured for the whole course of the summer, whether he leaves or not, it's tricky. It's worth saying that a player who's injured still can be transferred. You don't fail a medical because of an existing injury. Medicals are there to look for kind of hidden issues and hidden problems that you're unaware of when buying a player. So a problem like a hamstring problem that Tierney's got wouldn't stop him from signing for someone else, but of course it might still put teams off from that transfer, as he got injured at Sociedad last season while on loan and has got a continuation of injury issues. So yeah, there's scope for those players potentially to move on. And the last one is maybe at left field, but Gabriel Magalhaes seemingly always gets linked with an exit every single summer. Arsenal want to renew his contract again, despite doing it quite recently, but that one's gone a bit quiet, quite interestingly. So I don't want to worry anyone, but I'd rather he stays and rather he sign that new deal, and Arsenal hopefully will be proactive in getting him to sign another new deal.
Yeah, listen, I don't want to lose him at all. And, I had a show the other day and Staffy was on it and he said, well, that's Gabriel gone then. And he kind of threw in an opinion which kind of backed himself up. And he was talking about how there was links with Saudi before and how Arteta dropped him and Partey went at right back, etc. And he just kind of thought that Calafiori and Saliba would be the partnership at Arsenal in the near future. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not wrong. And maybe they will be in the next 3 years when Gabriel touches 30. Maybe he won't be here. But for me, it'd be foolish to break that up. It's been phenomenal, in my opinion. So I don't expect that to change at all, if I'm honest. I wanted to quickly, before I move departments, talk about Marc Guehi, because he keeps being linked with Arsenal for the last summer, this summer as well. There's the Metro today reporting that there could be a swap deal from Palace and Eddie Nketiah, or maybe a Smith-Rowe that they're interested in. Do we need a right-sided centre-back, Tom? Because if Saliba was to get injured, I don't know how we would cover that. I'm talking about a long-term injury here. Would we use Ben White? Would we use Tomiyasu? Would Timber come in? It was interesting to see him play at centre-back the other day in pre-season. But I don't know what your thoughts are to this rumour, or if it's just nonsense.
There's no smoke without fire, but I'd be surprised to see it happen. It's like swap deals in particular are really rare, especially in England. You don't really see. The last one Arsenal really got involved with was Alexis Sanchez and Henrik Mkhitaryan, and that was more of like money being exchanged for one player than the same amount of money being exchanged for the other. It was an amount of about £30 million or so was exchanged in either direction for those two sales. So yeah, I don't want to obviously just completely undermine the rumor, because there's, as I said before, there's no smoke without fire. But with such an abundance of players that we've got on that right hand side, I think Johan in the chat box pointed that as well. Tomiyasu, Timber, Ben White is there. There's also a young guy coming through called Josh Nichols, who's also plays in that position, and he's on the tour. He's very highly rated as well. So I don't. It plays at right back, so I don't necessarily think that there is need for that. If we were to sign a defender, I've always thought it would be maybe more so in the type of Calafiori if we moved on a Kivior or a Zinchenko.
Well, it looks like that's going to be happening. I've always kind of said that I'll happily take Marc Guehi, but is he going to want to come to Arsenal and sit on the bench behind Saliba? I don't think so. So I think that's going to be a kind of downwards move for him, believe it or not. I know that he's a better club, but you've got to play first team football for me at that age. So let's see what happens with Marc Guehi. Let's move into midfield. I would have to say this, Tom. I think this is an absolute priority area for Arsenal. Do you agree?
Yeah, it was my number one. I think we did a show a few months ago saying, where would my priority be? And I said, at the time, I think a lot of people said centre forward, but I said that, centre midfield is my number one area, because obviously the Partey situation's a bit up in the air about whether or not he's going to leave or whether he's going to see out the last year of his contract. Latest indications on that are more towards him actually seeing out the last year rather than leaving. So that's an interesting one to follow, because the interest, of course, from Saudi hasn't necessarily emerged too much in that area. James Benge, I think, had the latest word on that. And then you got Jorginho staying for another year, Smith-Rowe potentially going. And Smith-Rowe, while we think of Smith-Rowe playing the majority of his games on the left side, at the present day, whenever he comes on, it's either as a replacement for Odegaard or he's playing the left 8 alongside Odegaard. So he fits into that midfield category of players that we might need to replace. And obviously, the big name that's being talked about at the moment is Mikel Merino, who I rate very highly and have been talking about for a number of years now on the channel from his time at Real Sociedad. he's a player alongside Martin Zubimendi who has always kind of come up in conversations about what midfielders should we go for. It was always, in terms of Spanish players, him and Fabian, who obviously both of them had very good European championships with Spain this summer. But Mikel Merino never was ever really linked with Arsenal, so he didn't get talked about a lot until this summer has rolled around and his name has come out because, Real Sociedad don't tend to like to let their best players go. That's why Miko Oyarzabal is still there and has been for so many years. But also, they don't tend to sell players unless it's for buyout clauses and huge fees, similar to Athletic Club as well, who are another Basque side in Spain. So with Mikel Merino being 1 year left on his deal and having given them such good service, they are more willing and amenable to allowing him to leave for a more reasonable fee. And that's obviously opened up options from not just Arsenal, but Barcelona are said to be interested. Atletico Madrid have also been interested. And so far, supposedly, according to reports in Spain, been the only side really to put forward an official offer towards him. But the latest is that Arsenal are keen on him. They are very interested in him. They will move when they feel the time is right. There's a lot of resources going into this Calafiori situation, of course, at the moment to get that wrapped up and done. And it seems the noises are as well that Moreno would be keen on a switch to Arsenal because it's a move to a Champions League club. He's moving at a point in his career where this is like the last really big move in his career at, his mid to late 20s. And he would be playing Champions League football with a side challenging for the Premier League and potentially getting plenty of minutes because there's always opportunities to get if you prove yourself in a Mikel Arteta team. But yeah, I rate the guy.
Yeah, and I wanted to stick with him because Romano's tweeted a while ago now that, the interest from Arsenal in Merino remains absolutely strong. Arsenal have made several calls on the player's side to confirm their interest. It's one of the candidates for the midfield. He's not the only one, but the interest is very genuine. And I always go on AFC stuff because I quite like what they put out there just from a number of journalists about that. And there's quite a lot of kind of talk on it and say that Chelsea are interested, also Aston Villa, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, all these clubs that all want him. But apparently Arsenal and the team are the team, that Mikel Merino would like to join the most. Well, Merino is Arteta's midfield priority. Real Sociedad are expecting a formal offer from the Premier League that will satisfy their demand. So it looks like this could be a bit of a go, Tom. Looks like the proposal's being put together. You say you've followed him for a while. I actually didn't know that. I want to ask what sort of midfielder we might be getting and some of his attributes and whereabouts you think he can play in type of midfield.
Yeah, so before I got a job specifically covering Arsenal, La Liga and Spanish football was my jam, and I very much appreciated Mikel Merino's time in Spain. But obviously, he's played in other nations as well. He's been in Germany with Borussia Dortmund. He's been at Newcastle already in the Premier League as well. He made a few appearances for them. This is like 7 years ago. You having to go back though to see those performances, and he's come on a lot since then. There was always the big question about Mikel Merino when he was younger was like, what type of midfielder is he? And at Real Sociedad, he has kind of more found that place, especially playing, in this box-to-box midfield role where he ranks very highly in terms of midfielders in the top 5 European leagues in terms of touch in the penalty area for his position. He ranks very highly in terms of aerial duels. Of course, he had his heroics for Spain in the quarterfinals by showcasing that as well. He's a brilliant duel winner. He's not shying away from a challenge. He loves getting into tackles, but he's also a good goal scorer for a midfielder and will pop up with goals. And as I mentioned, with the amount of touches he has in the box per 90 is ranked very highly. So, yeah, I like the idea of bringing in a player that in a market where there isn't necessarily a standout Declan Rice-esque type signing that we can do for this position, that what you can do is go and get a slightly less expensive deal for a slightly older player who gives you immediate quality of a top level, has played in the Champions League, played for Spain, of course, has also held the captain's armband at times for Real Sociedad in certain games as well. So he's a fantastic presence in the dressing room. And you've got someone who you don't have to commit £100 million to, and that next summer, when Partey and Jorginho are probably not at the club, you've brought him in, and then you've opened up the space to still go out and get a top world-class potential player or someone who's not a lot younger and has got the potential to be that world-class player. So, yeah, it's very much in the ilk of a midfielder that I wanted to see Arsenal go for.
That's exciting. I haven't seen him much, I can't lie. I saw him at the Euros and I was quite impressed, funnily enough. But to be fair, I was impressed with the whole of Spain, if I'm honest. But when it comes to Mikel Merino, I like some of the attributes I see. I like what I read. I like what I hear. I've looked at the YouTube compilations, which is always very dangerous. But I have kind of liked what I've seen, bruv. I must say this. I mean, I've got two questions for you here in midfield, really. I think the first one is, if he comes in, do you think he starts? Because for me, Partey, Rice and Odegaard is still the best that we can look at when everybody's fit. So that's my first question to you.
Yeah.
And my second question is, do you still feel that we might need another midfield option on top of Merino?
In a dream world, probably. In terms of defensive options, we've got, I suppose, you've got Rice, you've got Top Partey, and you've got Jorginho, who could all play as a 6. At the left 8 position, you've got, of course, at the moment, Smith-Rowe, but he probably is going to go. You've got Rice will probably be the starter in that role, with Partey, I agree with you, being the starting left-sided centre midfielder. Mikel Merino would also be an option in that area. And you've got Fabio Vieira as well, who can also play in that position. And you've got Kai Havertz, who has played a number of times, although I'm not a big fan of seeing him in that role personally, and would rather he was playing further up the pitch. The other player that you've got to consider who can also play in central attacking midfield, and 2 of those attacking midfield, is Ethan Nwaneri, who I really want to see given opportunities this season. And the other player also, who's on the tour at the moment, who can play, is more of a defensive centre mid, but can play as an 8, is Miles Lewis-Skelly, who's also on the tour at the moment. And these are 2 really exciting young players. You know, we chastise and criticise Arteta for not giving his kids chances, but we also got to think about, at the same time, while we're desperately calling for signings, that we might be incidentally blocking the pathway for some of these really exciting younger players to get some opportunities. So I'd like to see, potentially, if we were to bring in Moreno and, you know, say Smith-Rowe goes, I think there's potential for us to go for maybe a versatile attacking player that could also play in midfield. But I would be mindful of blocking that pathway for Nwaneri to get more minutes, especially when you've got Rice, Merino, Jorginho and Partey all at the club as well, you know, for however long we've got them.
It's interesting, isn't it? What is also very interesting is there's nearly 700 people in here, and we haven't even hit 100 likes. That is poor, people.
What?
Come on, you're moving as slow as Edu and Arteta in a transfer window. Let's make sure we do hit the like button, please, and subscribe. We're trying to get up to 30k. We're almost at 23k now. And Tom also needs your love as well over at the Guna Talk TV. I'm sure that you already are subscribing. If you're not, I don't know where you've been, but please make sure you go show him some love as well. And please, I need you to click on the link it's pinned on the comments and go and get yourself some beard trimmers. Get it for yourself, get it for your brother, get it for your dad, get it for birthdays. If you want to get early Christmas present, then please make sure you do that. Go click on the link and you'll get 20% off. It is a deal that you cannot miss, people. So make sure that you do not miss it. Tom, I want to ask you about the potential of a crisis in midfield. Now, hear me out here. If the players stay that we believe, and Merino comes in, which is looking potentially likely now, which is great, and we were to get an injury to Martin Odegaard, if Smith-Rowe, who I'll ask you about in a minute, is not going to be there, who plays in that role? I know you've kind of covered some of the names there, but who would you like to see come in? Because you've given the options to some of the youngsters, and I agree with you. I think if Smith-Rowe was to go, when Nwaneri would probably be promoted. Fabio Vieira's still there. He ain't really my cup of tea, but he is an option there as well. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, we're kind of struggling. So what are you thinking of the attack-minded midfield role?
Yeah, I think that obviously what we sometimes fall into the trap of is sticking to what a formation is on paper when we have injuries and when players aren't available. And so the natural replacement you'd look at and say, well, you spent £34 million on Fabio Vieira. Yes, he's had injuries, and yes, he's not necessarily shown what he's capable of. I think that I think there is talent there. I mean, from what we saw at Porto, there was a really exciting talent there, producing lots of creativity. He was getting well into double digits for assists. So I think there is something there, but he needs a big preseason and he needs to stay fit and to get those opportunities. And when they come, he needs to take them. But in the reality where I have my doubts about that, if that's, feasible, I actually think that Gabriel Jesus has something to do with Kai Havertz in this. And I think that both of those two could potentially operate in a double striker system, in a sense of you've got Saka on the right, you've got Martinelli or Trossard on the left-hand side. You start with Jesus and Havertz playing as kind of one off each other. Havertz loves to drop in deep anyway. I think Havertz's best position is playing with a centre-forward and as close to them as he can be, so we can dovetail off them, move around, create unpredictable situations. And if you've got two players of the quality of Rice and Partey, you're not going to get overrun in midfield with those two being there. Yes, there's going to be turnovers as there is in any game, but suggestions that having Jesus and Havertz together might leave us too light in midfield, I think undermines actually how good Rice and Partey can be as a pairing. So I think that if in a situation like we had at Newcastle away last season, you don't have Odegaard, don't play Havertz in like the 8 role that he was before. Use Havertz in a role where I think he can really benefit from, which is playing off of another centre forward. And Jesus, I think, is probably the most slept on player in the team right now, personally.
I think it's great little segue into something I've got to ask you later. Listen, I think we need to look at sometimes in each department who might be leaving. I asked you about the defensive department. There is massive rumours that both Reiss Nelson and Emil Smith-Rowe will probably be leaving the club. Do you think there'll be anybody else on top of them leaving? And would you like to see them go, Tom? Because Smith-Rowe is the one that people are debatable about.
Yeah, sometimes I do like to see players leave, and not for any kind of malicious reasons, just because I think it's the right, just because I just think that they've either outstayed their welcome or they've been on the books for a long time and we should have moved them on earlier, or because we're going to get a really good fee for them. But with Smith-Rowe, I'm never going to be happy to see Smith-Rowe leave at all, because I think that he's a player that really embodied a lot of Arsenal's kind of young presence, at the club. So, and the pathway that there was available, and injuries and the presence of other players like Martinelli and then Trossard have obviously stunted that pathway for him. But that's not on Arteta necessarily, as some people might put it. I just think that he has been very unfortunate in terms of his injury situation. And when he's come back, he's found himself in a situation where the team and the system and the structure of the squad just doesn't really suit his profile. I look at him as very much a 10 who drives into the box and needs to play behind the striker. And with Odegaard in the squad and with this 2-8-8 system, it doesn't really suit him as much, because his tracking back just isn't. He's not the box-to-box midfielder that we need for that left centre mid role. He is very much more of an offensive-minded player. And with the amount of players we've got on the left, and maybe even more if a winger was to come in that can also play there, it squeezes his minutes even further. So the suggestions are that he'll go. I think that he will. Fulham have already had a bid in excess of £25 million rejected. How close to 30, I'm not 100% sure, but there's been some reports suggesting it was 30. I've just heard that it's upwards of 25, and my colleague Kai Karnak from London has also reported that too. So I would expect Arsenal's demands to be around 35 million, would be my expectation. And I think that would be a really good amount of money to get for Smith-Rowe. If we think about 2 years ago, when Smith-Rowe was at his peak in 2022, we rejected 2 bids from Aston Villa at 25 million and 30 million for him. So 2 years later, with his peak, his kind of stock at the lowest it's arguably been in his senior career, if we can get more money than we actually got offered during those periods, I think that represents good business for Arsenal.
Yeah, it does. And I broke up a bit when you said the club. Was it Fulham or Palace you were meaning?
Fulham has made the bid. Palace are also interested, though.
Okay, that's interesting for me, because there's a lot of kind of potential for this to have a little bit of a bidding war, not just for Smith-Rowe, but also for other players at Arsenal. Reiss Nelson being one that I think West Ham are interested in. Forest were kind of sniffing around from what I saw briefly. I don't know if that's still happening. But I think that leads me on nicely, Tom, to Reiss Nelson leaving Arsenal. I think he needs to. I think he needs to go and find first team football. I wish him well, because he is proper Arsenal. I've been a big fan of him as a person, and I know he has not quite worked out for him at Arsenal, but I hope he has a good career. I wanted to come to you with a kind of source that was read out on Straight Facts on the Terrace with myself, LB, and Terry just not long ago, which was suggesting that after Calafiori is done, Arsenal are going to go all out for Merino and for Nico Williams. Now, people will, and someone did in the chat earlier, actually, which I've lost the chat comment now, was, why are we getting another left winger? We need a right winger to cover for Saka. Now, Nico Williams, from what I believe, can play on the right wing as well. Yeah. Obviously, Martinelli and Trossard can play there, to be fair, and Gabriel Jesus can play out wide as well. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, on the outright about Nico Williams. I mean, I really would be excited by this. He lit up the Euros. He's been phenomenal in the last season. He's been spoken about by a lot of people. Some, though, however, in the chat and in the chat on the last show, were sort of like, he's not really been that great. He's had a meaty season. I'm not too sure about it. Where are you at, mate? Would this be an exciting signing for Arsenal, and do you think we could get it done?
If Arsenal sign Nico Williams, it would be the signing of the summer. For me, because at 22 years of age, having played on both. I mean, for anyone saying to you like he's a left winger, he doesn't play on the right, they're just outing themselves as people who haven't watched him because he does play on both sides. And even though he's predominantly right-footed, he can use his left. He scores goals with his left, and he's very creative as a player and a winger as well. He loves to put crosses into the box, and when you've got a player like Havertz in the box, you want to see those types of chances. I think his chance creation type is perfect for Arsenal, where he dives towards the byline, can cut the ball back, but can also get some early crosses into the box as well. The variation's really good. The problem is I give this like a 5% chance of happening, and I just can't see it. I know I hope I'm proven wrong, but it seems from everyone that we've talked to, like he's the one who is the most keen on one specific club, and that's Barcelona. Barcelona is where he sees himself. I think that the partnership he's built up at the Spanish national side with Lamine Yamal on the right-hand side and him playing on the left to replicate that at club level, I think would attract him a lot. So he can kind of, just transition so seamlessly between club and international football. But Barcelona's situation is so complicated with their money situation and how they're going to fund transfers. Athletic Club have a release clause, but the issue is that they want that paid, the majority of, if not all of it, up front. It like they do in like we did with Partey, of course, when we activated his £45 million release clause, we had to pay that all up front to activate the release clause. So it's the same situation with Nico. I think if Barcelona struggled to get this deal done, then Arsenal would certainly be looking at it. Arsenal this summer are with a window where we, as I've mentioned already, there isn't the Declan Rices, there isn't the Gabriel Jesus obvious targets that we've had in previous windows in, midfield and attacking positions. They're very much in this market acting on opportunity and for market opportunities in particular. Calafiori is one of those. Merino, with 1 year left on his deal at his age group with the midfield difficulties in this market, is another opportunity. Sesko at the beginning of the window was another opportunity that they were keen on, but obviously he chose instead to stay with RB Leipzig for at least another season. They're being opportunistic this window. And to be honest, that is what clubs, when you get to the level of being a title challenger, will tend to look to. They'll look for opportunities because reinforcing and improving a squad that is challenging for a title is far harder than it is for a team like Man United or Spurs or Chelsea at the moment, who are struggling to even, break into the top four at times. It's far easier to improve those sides with the, players that are out there, but the players that are available that will improve United, that will improve Spurs, that will improve Chelsea, won't improve us because our level is so much significantly higher. So Arsenal are looking for those opportunities. Mikel Arteta really likes Nico Williams, but to do that deal would require, I think, a lot of dominoes to fall certain ways, and I just don't see it. I just can't see it happening. It would be like, and that said, like Lenny Yoro, who's gone to Man United, that situation where Real Madrid wanted him, he wanted to go to Real Madrid, but Lille basically said, you've got to go because Man United are offering us a joke amount of money for you.
Yeah.
Far more than Real Madrid, like more than double what Real Madrid are willing to pay. And they said, if you don't go, like, you're not, I think there was a report that went out from French media suggesting he wouldn't be playing for them basically because they need that money. And he only had 1 year left on his deals. It was almost like they got him out the club to get that money in. And that's not the situation with Nico because he only has recently signed a new deal and he likes being Athletic Club. It's his hometown club. He's come through that. It's a very family-orientated group, that group in Athletic. So it's such a difficult deal to do for Arsenal.
It sounds it. Is there going to be a potential domino effect here, though, Tom? Because I keep seeing Barcelona linked with... Apparently, Barcelona got no money, by the way.
Yeah, I
but
know.
they link with everybody, right? They're linked with Dani Olmo today. They're linked with Merino, who we've mentioned. Nico Williams is the guy that apparently wants to go there. They've already got Rafinha, Ferran Torres, Frankie de Jong. They've got what's the name? Pedri, Lamine Yamal. Well, who's leaving then? Because they can't buy all these players, surely. Do we expect to see maybe Arsenal or other clubs linked with some of the Barcelona players? I know Rafinha was linked the other day. I don't know how true that one is. Do you think that there could be a potential domino effect here and that Barcelona might look to sell and Arsenal might be able to take one of their players? Or do you just not see that as something that could happen?
Yeah, obviously Rafinha has been talked about. I haven't heard anything suggest Arsenal's interest in him has kind of persisted. So I think Aston Villa are a team that might look at him to replace Moussa Diaby, who's obviously left for Saudi Arabia. So there's that. the Barca situation is so strange because yes, there's so much financial pressure. They do a lot behind the scenes commercially to try and help that situation, to give them more freedom to spend. I think there's some chaotic kind of stories about them, like even selling seats, like to raise money. It's crazy, like some of the stuff and some of the techniques they're using to try and raise money and raise funds and give them some financial freedom. But yeah, the window being slow, and the start of the window, when more opportunities do arise in the next coming weeks and into the start of August, I think that will have a domino effect in general across Europe, not just with Barcelona or Arsenal. I think you'll start to see, the deals start to ramp up. And I do think in the final weeks of the window, which I know that fans won't want to hear because you want to get your players in early. But for me, I know Arsenal have got a good enough squad to start the season strongly already without any signing. So as long as we get to the end of the window and we have improved the squad, that's all I care about. Whether they come in early is a bonus to me. If they come in early, it's a bonus. As long as they come in, that's what matters, because our squad is very much good enough to get through August. I know we've got tough games at the start of the season, but to be honest, with Man City being our third game, even if we were to make some great signings, the fact that they would have to bed in for the third game of the Premier League season against Man City is a big ask in itself anyway. So just get the players in before the deadline and start the season strong, but hopefully more business will be done as the weeks go on.
Yeah, we're going to need it. Listen, the last department we've got to talk to you about is the striker situation. Now, it looks like Eddie Nketiah is off. I don't know if the rumours are true about Marseille. Sounds like, from what I read, that he would be interested in a move over to Marseille. And there's definitely Premier League clubs that have sniffed around him, Wolves being one of them, I think Fulham, and I think was it Forest or somebody that was interested in looking at the Eddie Nketiah situation. Where do you see that going, first of all, Tom, before we look at anything else? Because Eddie Nketiah is a player that has kind of been around for a while. He's 24, 25 now. He's not a young kid anymore. People have spoken about the money and saying like 20 million, 25, 30, it keeps going up. If Elliot Anderson's going for £35 million and he's hardly kicked a ball really for Newcastle, should Eddie be going for about that as well?
Well, I mean, we could point to loads of signings. I think Newcastle, Aston Villa, and Everton are really difficult examples to look at because of the whole PSR situation and how they've and Forest as well. There's been some really eyebrow raising deals there. That kind of, Fry from Futurama, that meme of him where he kind of gets a bit suspicious. That meme represents those four clubs this summer basically, and the things that have gone on, because there's just so much suspicion about what's there. So Newcastle sales, it's a bit tricky to kind of make comparisons, but I still think that Eddie Nketiah should be fetching Arsenal at least £25 million. The rumours with Marseille are accurate. They are interested in him. The latest suggestions are that they want a loan with an obligation, or either an option. Arsenal will want either a sale and an obligation, like we did with Tavares, of course, to Lazio earlier on in the window. It doesn't matter if it is a loan with an obligation or a sale. Either of those two suits Arsenal just fine. It gives Arsenal financial freedom because they know that money will be coming in, next year. So that's not an issue if it's either one of those. If it's a loan with an option, I think it'd be very disappointing in terms of a deal for Arsenal. And I hope that option, or rather the obligation, I hope that does take place, is at least £25 million. Because I think that's what he's worth. He's an England international. He's on a decent contract. He scored goals in the Premier League. He's of a really good age. So, yeah, there's absolutely no reason why Arsenal shouldn't be trying to get at least 25 million. And I'll be disappointed if we didn't.
Yeah, I would. I'd be really disappointed if we didn't get at least 30 million for both Smith-Rowe and Eddie Nketiah. I really would. I think it'd be mad. Reece Nelson, fair play. I don't think we could be expecting more than between 15 and 20, if I'm honest, for Reece Nelson.
If we got 15 million for Reece Nelson, I think that's great. Like,
I would accept that we go lower with Reece because he's hardly kicked ball. Whereas at least with Eddie and Smith-Rowe, Eddie, whether you like him or hate him, has played a lot of football at Arsenal, and Emil Smith-Rowe was one of the prospects that was coming through a couple of years ago that we thought was going to be a fantastic talent. So I understand that. But if we do sell Eddie, Tom, does that mean someone's got to come in? Because that leaves us Havertz and Jesus only. Trossard, Martinelli potentially one day might play there, but we're going to need a striker, are we not?
I have striker fourth on my list of priorities. Okay. It was centre midfielder first. winger, as in like a Bukayo Saka competitor second, a defender third, and then centre forward was my fourth, because there's a number of reasons why it's fourth. It's not just like, oh, that's the fourth most need. It takes into consideration the options that are, of course, out there in the different positions as well. And there just really isn't, the standout candidates to go in and spend what would be a large majority of your budget on a centre forward, which there are two real possibilities, which are Gyokeres and Osimhen are the two that could move this window. Gyokeres can move because he has a €100 million release clause, so around £86 million. Osimhen will move on because that's his priority to do that, and Napoli are willing to make that happen because they've already agreed that deal to bring in Romelu Lukaku as replacement. But for me, like, Osimhen is, I just don't see him as being the guy, like, to be Arsenal's marquee centre forward signing for the future. Like, in a dream world, you and me would both get Alexander Isak. That would be the dream.
100%.
That's the dream scenario. But the reality is, as has been proven this window, is that Newcastle didn't have to sell him. Neither that or Bruno Guimaraes at the moment. I'm not saying the door's closed on a Guimaraes exit this summer. It may still be ajar, but Isak was always their priority to keep, and they had absolutely zero interest. And if you had to try and convince them, it was going to be a potentially Premier League record-breaking deal, to get that done, which would be well over 100 million, perhaps over 120, perhaps over 140 million to get that deal done, which is tricky to justify your entire budget, which is what it would be. I mean, do Arsenal need a centre forwards more than anything else in terms of getting Isak in would mean no more signings at all, and potentially having to sell off some players that we didn't have to sell off, that we didn't want to sell off to make it happen. I'm not sure, especially for a player that's had his injury issues as well. So you're taking a bit of a risk there. But yeah, Osimhen, like, I just think the name is bigger than the reality with him. I've looked into the numbers of his, and like, when you actually break down his numbers and Havertz's numbers for Arsenal, you'd be surprised how similar they are. And people won't like to hear that, but you'd be surprised. Like, the finishing in terms of kind of how often he takes his chances compared to Havertz. And then when you add in Havertz's collaborative numbers in terms of how many opportunities he creates for other players, there starts to be even an edge towards Havertz between the two. Gyokeres is the more kind of lottery signing. It's like, this guy's got 50 goal contributions last season, an insane record of finishing, but he did it once in the Portuguese league for the team that was and is the most dominant in Sporting at the moment, alongside Porto and Benfica. And then obviously was in the Championship with Coventry before that, scored, I think, 22 league goals for them, and has taken that forward. But is he going to be able to replicate that for Arsenal in the Premier League? And that's the big question mark about Gyokeres. And I think the reason why you've
in the last couple of hours saying that he's back on and that we're in for him again. And if I'm honest with you, Tom, if it ain't Isak, he's the one that I would probably look towards as being the most realistic. I'd probably still want us to go in for Tony, because my thoughts on Tony, I think he'd be a good signing for Arsenal still. However, I don't think anything at the moment other than Alexander Isak is guaranteed to be giving Arsenal goals. So I can understand why it might be not a priority area because of the players that are about. And I think that's the thing, that if there was 5 Alexander Isak options, then you might be more of a priority and think, wow, look at this. We've got one of these 5 that we can get in. All of them are going to be banging. Let's go and sort it out. I think, there's a couple of reports. I don't know how reliable people are with sources and reports. They're saying that we are looking again at Victor Gyokeres. Now, I quite like the fact that he's come from Coventry. A lot of people don't like that. I
like that as well.
I think it's a very competitive league. I think it toughens you up. And I think, to get 25 goals, whatever it was he got for Coventry, and pretty much single-handedly put into a playoff final, was very impressive. When he went to Sporting Lisbon, I was a little bit shocked, if I'm honest. I thought he would have gone to Premier League. But when he went,
there wasn't the offers, apparently, I heard. Like, he didn't get too many
Wolves
offers.
were like the only one that were interested. That was it. So he went to Sporting and he absolutely smashed it. I mean, it's like 40 GA or something. Could he do that in the Premier League? I really don't know, bruv. I have absolutely no idea. But would it be worth hanging off and holding fire on it and going for Isak the following summer, for example? Or do we just go and get this done now and stop like waiting around and just take a risk to try and get one? And I kind of don't know where I'm at with that, because if you guaranteed me Isak in the summer, I'd probably say hold off and get him. and
but
make sure
there
you
is
get
no
your upper area.
guarantee, and
But
that's
there
the
is no
problem.
guarantee. So what do we do, man? It's a real
Because
hard one. Isn't it?
if I'm putting my thinking cap on and trying to predict what's going to happen, I think Isak will probably sign a new deal with Newcastle. It would be my prediction. So that makes it even more difficult to go and get him. Are Arsenal going to have, in this climate of financial restrictions, going to have the money to buy him next summer? I think it would take a serious sale of Arsenal, and we've not got a good track record of doing serious big sales in recent years. So I struggle to see that. So Gyokeres is there for 86 million quid. Do you take the option now and think, I mean, it was 58 goals and assists he got last season in 50 games, which is stunning. Can he replicate that? Has he got the technical ability to be able to do that? Because that's been the question mark I've heard from people, is that technically, is he of a level that could transition to not just the Premier League, but to an Arsenal team? You know, and that's the question mark. He's playing for Sporting in that league with those players, and I mean that with the greatest amount of respect. And as someone, you know, who watches my fair amount of European football, and I try to, and I've spoken, you know, as respectfully as I can about these leagues, you still have to ask the question. You still have to raise the risk assessment of that move. And I think I'd be more inclined to see how Šeško does for another season at Leipzig, for instance. And if he has a really good season for Leipzig again and kind of goes on, I think I'd rather lean towards him in a year's time than I would say jump the gun and get Gyokeres now. And I used to, you know, really lean more towards Gyokeres, but the more I've been able to watch Šeško, and I know he didn't have like an amazing Euros, and you know he didn't score, I don't think, but you know it's the context of playing for Slovenia is very different. But he has shown some really good talent, and I'm just not
sure.
sure
We were
if
serious with him then, Tom. Do you think that was a serious one?
the interest was serious in terms of Arsenal liked him a lot. The noise about kind of it getting close and being done was always louder than the actual reality of the situation, because he was always very open to the idea of staying at Leipzig. Arsenal, from what I've heard, you know, was interested, and there was, you know, discussions, but there wasn't. It was never close. Like, it was never as close as what was being made out. The same as like some of these Gyokeres reports a few weeks ago made it out that, you know, he was basically in advanced stages, and we were going to hear more in a few days. It was that Leonino outlet in Portugal that was reporting it, or whatever it was, which turned out to be a load of bogus. So, you know, it's got to be really, you got to be really careful with this position, because Arsenal have never. I'm trying to think of the last, beyond, I think probably Aubameyang's the last time we went and spent like marquee money on a centre forwards, and he scored a lot of goals for us. It didn't turn out to be the transformative figure, but we spent a lot of money on Lacazette, and that didn't go well. You know, and we had to, within 6 months, we were already going out and buying Aubameyang because the Lacazette situation wasn't, and Alexis was leaving. Giroud, obviously, we spent a decent amount on for the time and the Arsenal context of spending back then in 2012. I like Giroud, but he obviously was never going to be, he was never a world-class centre forward. We've got to find that player. I do believe that we need that player, but I just don't believe that they're out there at the moment that I'd be willing to jump. Other than Isak is the only one I'd think, yeah, he could be the guy. And I just think I'd rather wait, especially when you've got Havertz and Jesus and Trossard as well still at the club.
Listen, what I love about what you say, Tom, is you always back up how you're feeling, man. And if people don't agree with you, you'll always at least give your opinion and actually back up your opinion, which is why I have so much respect for what you do. I will say, though, I've got to ask you about this Cheeto Obi-Martin stuff, man, quickly, because what's happening here, man? I've been a big fan from what I hear. He's been banging goals in for fun. 8 goals here, 7 goals here. I think it's all 10 in one game or something crazy.
11.
It's mad, bro. It's absolutely mad. I've got kind of not a link with the club, but I've got a link to the youth academy. And apparently he was asking for crazy money at Arsenal. Like, we're talking like more than Smith-Rowe's on now. He was asking.
Really?
Yeah, and they've obviously, as much as they rate him, I think it sounds like the club have said, our protocol and our principles are that we just don't do that. Like, none of our scholarships get more than 25, 30k tops. And he was asking for like nearly double that, apparently. So they've decided, it seems, and Romano's tweeted now that he's going to be leaving. And Manchester United are rumoured to be signing him. Are you gutted about this one? How do you feel about it, bro?
Yeah, of course I'm gutted. Yeah, he's a talented player. Like, and I don't like seeing those players leave. But I don't know how anyone can really point the finger at anyone at Arsenal for this situation. The only thing I think that maybe Arsenal could have done is given him a few more opportunities in the under 21s quicker, because obviously he's an under 18s player. But he's 16, and like we promoted him to that level very quickly. We got him into those games. He was playing, week in, week out for that team, scoring plenty of goals. He did get some minutes at under 21 level. He also played for the under 19s in the UEFA Youth League, as well. So he was getting opportunities in for his age group, very good places. And some people turn around and say, "Oh, well, look how good he is. Just give him the money. Like just pay the money and keep him." If that's what you're saying is accurate in this context, and I'd say to that, well, if you do that, every single kid that comes along at the age of 15, 16, that's got a bit about him and a bit of talent, is going to be like, you paid him 70 odd grand a week or whatever. Of course I'm not going to stay because you're not going to give me that money. You have to be principled. You have to have that philosophy and those rules in place so that those players in the future that come down the pipeline don't take advantage of it. What I also say is, and I don't like necessarily talking about players at this kind of age too often because let's be honest, a year ago, how many Arsenal fans knew who Chido Obi-Martin was? Like, barely any knew him a year ago. And all of a sudden now it's this big thing. He's also only been at the club for 2 years. So it's not like a Saka situation. It's not like a Nwaneri situation where these guys are ingrained Arsenal, born and bred, like it's in their bones to be at Arsenal. And Nwaneri, I know there's a lot of talk about other clubs being interested in when he eventually signed his deal. But from what I understood, Arsenal was always going to be the place where he was keen to stay, but it was obviously a big conversation about how do you pay the money. And to be fair to Arsenal, like from what I know, Nwaneri is for a professional contract got a very good deal, probably the biggest deal in Arsenal's history for his age group at that time. So to keep him at the club and to represent what they see in him and how much faith they've got in him. We also gave Folarin Balogun, when he signed a new deal, a very good pay packet when he signed that new, despite not having yet made much of an impact at senior level, which proved to be a good thing because we got, well over 30 million quid in the end for Balogun, who's not necessarily gone on to prove himself at Monaco this season. So with Obi-Martin, yes, it sucks that he's going. But I think there's some really exciting players still coming through. Nwaneri, as I've mentioned, Miles Lewis-Skelly, we've mentioned, Max Doman as well, 14-year-old kids. Don't go hyper on him because, again, he's only 14, but he is also one the club really, really like. And just because this guy, who, to be fair, has a very good physical advantage against a lot of the players he's coming up against in this age group at the moment, which does help him out a lot, will soon, the playing field will begin to level out the more he goes into that senior level. And I think a good example is looking at someone like Youssoufa Moukoko at Borussia Dortmund. This guy has scored tons of goals at youth level. And this is a recent example. He has broken into the senior team at Borussia Dortmund, but it's not like the second coming of Erling Haaland there at the moment. He's only 19 at the moment. So there's still, I think, but there's still scrutiny to be had there. But I just think that, if you're losing your head over Chido Obi-Martin, you're pointing fingers at the club for this. I just struggle with that argument.
I mean, a good example I've seen as well is you've mentioned there, but actually away football as a kid, I know literally was unbelievable football. And I was like, you are going to be making it. You are so good. Literally destroyed everybody you come near, and everybody else grew up. And he kind of didn't. So it was kind of the opposite, really. You're talking about someone who was quite physically strong and then absolutely smashed it. This kid was kind of on a level playing field with us, and nobody else was anywhere near him. And all of a sudden, he didn't grow up at all. He was about 5'6", and he just got pushed off the ball. And he couldn't make it at all. So it doesn't mean that because a 14-year-old is absolutely killing it, he's going to go and be the next Thierry Henry. So I absolutely agree with you. And I do think we need to look now at potentially what happens next. I wanted to, before we leave, talk about Jesus very quickly, because there was some kind of rumours yesterday about Saudi Arabia looking at him. I wanted to ask you if you believe that he's got a future at Arsenal, because a lot of people are unsure. And Tommy's got to stay fit if he wants to stay at Arsenal. And he hasn't been able to do that, mate. And there's a lot of rumours suggesting that his knee is going to be okay now and he's looking fitter than ever. And but I kind of have heard this before with Jesus. I wanted to see where you're at with him and what sort of season you think he can have, mate.
I think that, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Jesus is probably the most slept-on player in the team, like in terms of like how he's being spoken about, how underrated he's being. As a player in the squad, because I think that this guy, when he first arrived at Arsenal, I'm struggling to think of a player, I mean, perhaps even more so than Declan Rice at times. I know there was all the furore about the signing of Rice and the money we paid, but when Jesus came in and scored within seconds of coming off the bench in that friendly against Nuremberg, and then scored against Chelsea and played brilliantly against Everton in pre-season, the hype around Jesus at that point, I'm struggling to think of a player that there was the same level of hype about. But at the same time, I'm struggling to think of a player where that hype has diminished so rapidly since their arrival. Now, that's obviously in part due to significant injuries that he suffered that have really plagued him, which is out of his control. But what is in his control is the goal scoring side when he does play. And that is the element of Jesus' game that if he can finally grasp and turn into consistency, he very quickly becomes one of the best centre forwards in the world. And that comes from not just, watching a week in, week out. You look at the numbers that he produces across the board in terms of outside of the goal scoring side of things, which I know people will roll their eyes at when talking about a striker, but what's the word? Bear with me a second on it. Just the numbers outside of the goal scoring is like highest percentiles for creation for other players, highest percentiles for take-ons, highest percentiles for touches in the box, highest percentiles for pressures and for blocks and interceptions and tackles for a player in that position. He's the hardest working player in the team by a distance when he plays. And if he can turn everything else and just tweak, so to find that confidence to start banging in the goals week in, week out, or just one every 2 games, you've suddenly got, as I said, one of the best strikers around. And there is something there that I think that we can use moving into next season.
Listen, put delightfully, mate. And I agree with everything you've said about Jesus. I just want to see the guy just play, stay fit. I think he's a good footballer. Do I think he's a striker? Probably not, if I'm honest. I might actually see him as a wide player, but I do actually look at him and think he's a good player. And I want to see him fit. I'm going to do these super chats before we do come to a close. This one comes in from Eric. It says, hi, guys. I actually think that Arteta should try a 3-4-3 with Gabriel, Saliba and Calafiori as a back three, and then Rice, Partey or Merino, and Odegaard and Timber in the midfield, and any front three formation he desires. This makes our front three stay more forward. Do you think there might be system change, formation change again? We noticed at the start of last season that we expected it to be the same, and then all of a sudden, what's happening here? Partey's at right back. We've got Gabriel on the bench, and it all changed a little bit. Do you expect to see anything like that again, Tom, with Mikel Arteta?
I mean, we basically play with the back three when we're on the attack anyway. One of the fullbacks, either White or Zinchenko or Tomiyasu or Kivior, or, pushes up and supports either the midfield or the wide areas anyway. So we play like that. And when we go to places like City, we sometimes even play with a back five. And defensively, we can sit, and you can clearly see when you look at kind of the maps and the replays that we're playing with a back five. So, we get very fixated on what formations are on paper and how the team is being laid out and lined up as. But in reality, and I think Arteta said in one of those press conferences, didn't he? He was like, we played with like 70 different formations in one game. And he's not taking the mick. That genuinely is what they work on, the different structures of different game states at different times for different situations. Football is so advanced beyond anyone can really realize unless you're there inside the Shabba Realty Training Center and looking at what they're doing, because the players' knowledge and understanding of what the system needs to be has to be so spot on. Like, you have to know every in and out of every different scenario and what he wants from different situations. And whether we should play 3-4-3 or 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 or 5-2-5-3-2, It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that we win games and know how to beat different teams. And if we've got the players, and I believe that we do already, even before making signings to do that, I think we're going to be fine.
Listen, I hope you're right, bro. Let's bring this one up next. Big up to Eric for the super chat, man. And also big up to Troy. What's this one? Oh, here we go. I thought this might have been asked with you as soon as you're on, Tom. Should Arteta be sacked if we don't win a trophy next season? I was asked this on the terrace, believe it or not. It's the last question I was asked. So I'm not going to give my answer because I've given my answer enough on this channel and on Terry's channel. Everyone will be bored of it. So, Tom, I'll let you answer this super chat.
No is the answer. Arteta should be sacked if Arsenal regress, certainly. And if we start to go backwards as a club, then it falls on the manager. As I've mentioned before, in short, I think he's earned the next contract, but that next contract must deliver a Premier League title or a Champions League title. Otherwise, it will have told us that this is as far as he can take us. But he is without doubt earned the next deal, but the next deal comes with far higher standards, as some people might want to ask for.
There we go. What we should do is clip what I said and clip what you said, and then it will just cause absolute debate, and that would just be another podcast.
What did you say?
We don't have time. I said that he needs a trophy, otherwise I would look for a replacement.
Fair enough.
That's what
Fair
I
enough.
said.
We'll cross that bridge.
But we will have another chat about that because there's not the time for that now. I'm sure the chat will probably want us to, but we have other things to do. Listen, Tom, it's an absolute pleasure having you on, mate. It really is. It always is an absolute a great chat about Arsenal when you do come and talk on the channel. And again, it's been a pleasure, mate. Tell everybody what you're up to and how people can follow you, mate.
Yeah, I think my mic's just died as well, like the last.
We can still hear you, mate, but it's all good.
If you can hear me, good. But I'll get that sorted. Yeah, you can find me at the Gooner Talk every morning, 8 a.m. So find us there. And yeah, thank you for having me on, Dan, as always.
No, pleasure, man. Come on, absolute legends. Listen, people, there's 700 of you in here still. Make sure you do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, because we're still not at 300, which is what we should be at now. So please make sure that you've hit the like button and subscribe. And then click on the pinned comment and get yourself some beard trimmers. There is a deal of 20% off. All you got to do is click the link and then you can get it. The 20% off will go off automatically. So please make sure that you do that now. I'm sure there'll be at least 10 to 15 of you that are well up for your male grooming. It is Manscaped, but it is not below the belt grooming this time. It is for the beard hedger. So please make sure that you go over and sort yourself out and support Manscaped as well. Tom, thank you so much for coming on. Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure for all of you for being in the chat. Please make sure you do me a favor, hit the like on your way out and check out Manscaped. We'll see you next time.
Yes, people, Manscaped is back. But this time, it's not for below the belt grooming. Manscaped brings to you the Beard Hedger, the best product on the market when it comes to beard trimmers. The Beard Hedger is unique due to its number of gradient settings. As someone who's purchased this, I won't turn to any other beard trimmer. Check it out for yourself at manscaped.com. And don't forget to use code FTM20 to get 20% off of this product.